How do we know God exists? That is the question we will answer on this episode of Thinking Christianly. Hello everyone, this is Dr. Todd. And before we get started, let me remind you, if you enjoy watching these videos, don't forget to click the subscribe button below. Also, if you have any questions about this video or any request for future videos, please leave them in the comments section below. Now on to our topic. So how do we know God exists? Some might say, well, if I see Him, I'll believe in Him. Well, just because you can't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. For example, think about being on a combat mission in Southeast Asia in the 60s or 70s. You're walking through the jungle. Now, you don't see the Vietnamese sniper, but that doesn't mean that he's not there. All it means is that he has chosen not to reveal himself to you. In a similar way, we can't see God unless He chooses to reveal Himself. Now, fortunately for us, He has chosen to reveal Himself. He does it in a couple of specific ways. And today I'm going to mention both of these ways, but we're going to expand on the first one. In the next video, I will talk about the second way. So what are these two ways that God reveals Himself? Millard Erickson calls these two forms of revelation general and special. According to Erickson, general revelation is God's communication of Himself to all persons at all times and in all places. In contrast, Erickson refers to special revelation as involving God's particular communication and manifestations of Himself to particular persons at particular times, communication and manifestations that are available now only by consulting certain sacred writings. So let me simplify this for you. General revelation is God revealing Himself through nature, and special revelation is God revealing Himself through the Bible. So, since we're dealing with general revelation in this video, how then does God go about revealing Himself in nature? Well, first we see God's presence in the creation's orderliness and beauty. Think of the seasons. Think of the sunset. Think of the birth of a baby. Second, we see God's hand in providence as He works out situations according to His will in history. When we look back on the events of our lives, we often see where God's hand had been at work guiding us to our present location. Third, we see God in the moral character of human beings. We're all born with an innate sense of right and wrong, a sense that points us to a transcendent lawgiver. And last, we see God's revelation of Himself through the religious nature of all people at all times. As worshipers, we demonstrate that there's an object of worship that is outside of us. This object is bigger than us, and that something is not a something, but a someone. And that someone, from a Christian perspective, is the Creator of God. Well, the Bible seems to teach that general revelation shows us enough of God to make us responsible, but not enough to save us. We see this in places like Psalm 19, Romans 1. Paul seems to indicate we need the gospel as revealed in the Scripture to come to a saving knowledge of God. In Romans, he shows us that all of us know God exists, but because of our sinful natures, we suppress this truth in unrighteousness. In other words, we don't see the sniper, because we don't want to see the sniper. Because if we see the sniper, we know we're going to have to change the way we conduct our lives. Well, you may be thinking, okay, what about people like those natives in a remote village in the Amazon who've never heard of the gospel? Does that mean that they're going to go to hell? Well, that's a good question. I think those individuals are much like the Old Testament saints. They, like all of us, have to respond to the amount of light God has given us. Erickson puts it this way. He says, now if the God known in nature, in other words, if they respond to the light they have, is the same as the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, as Paul seems to assert in Acts 17:23, then it would seem that persons who come to a belief in a single powerful God, who despair of any works righteousness to please this holy God, and who throw themselves on the mercy of this good God, would be accepted, as were the Old Testament believers. So before we get too worked up about the natives who live in the Amazonian rainforest, we also have to remember how salvation occurs in the first place. We are saved by the grace and mercy of God, not by our own works. And the God who dispenses this grace and mercy is also a righteous and just God, a God who can be counted on to do the right thing at the right time and in the right way. And it's this rightness that means that He will deal with those who haven't heard and haven't had the opportunity to hear the gospel in the right way. You know, the bottom line is that God has revealed Himself to us through the things which have been made. And therefore we're without excuse. God is there. He exists. And He commands those of us who know Him to go and tell others about His existence. Well, I hope this talk has been helpful. If you have any questions or ideas for future videos, please leave them in the comments section below. Until next time, God bless, and we'll talk again soon.